Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Tonight, we're diving into a story that will completely transform how you think about beauty, vanity, and the lengths humans will go to feel attractive. Imagine spending 4 hours every single morning on your appearance, not for a wedding, not for a special event, but because your soul's journey to the afterlife literally depended on it. What if I told you that thousands of years ago, people were dying from their beauty routines, that the cosmetics they used daily contained poison, and that the most famous, beautiful woman in history might not have been beautiful at all? Tonight, we're exploring ancient Egyptian beauty standards, and trust me, they make modern Instagram culture look absolutely tame by comparison. Before we dive in, please hit that subscribe button and drop a like if you enjoy deep dives into history's most fascinating mysteries. I'm genuinely curious, where are you watching from right now? Your bedroom? Your living room? Maybe you're unwinding after a long day? Let me know in the comments below. I love connecting with you all. Now get comfortable. Maybe dim the lights, and let's travel back in time to ancient Egypt, where beauty wasn't just about looking good, it was about survival itself. Picture this, it's 3000 BC, and you're waking up along the Nile River in ancient Thebes. But you can't just roll out of bed and start your day. According to ancient Egyptian beliefs, your physical appearance was directly connected to your spiritual purity and your chances of reaching the afterlife. This wasn't vanity, this was religion. The ancient Egyptians had a concept called Isfet, which essentially meant cosmic chaos. And you know what they believed could cause this chaos? An improperly maintained physical appearance. Your face, your body, your grooming, all of it was seen as a reflection of your soul's readiness for eternity. Research shows that Egyptians spent an average of 3 to 4 hours daily on their beauty routines. That's like having a part-time job just for your appearance. But here's where it gets really interesting and honestly heartbreaking. When scientists analyzed ancient Egyptian cosmetic tools housed in museums around the world, they found something shocking. Many of the most prized beauty products contained lead sulfide, copper, and even arsenic. Yes, arsenic, the poison, the very substances that made Egyptian eyes so dramatically beautiful were slowly killing them. Let me paint you a picture of a typical morning for an upper-class Egyptian woman. Let's call her Nefret. She'd wake before dawn to the chanting of her personal beautician, who was actually considered a type of priest. That's right, beauticians held religious status because they were preparing souls for the divine realm. First, Nefret would undergo a purification ritual using natron salt, the same substance used in mummification. You can already see the connection between daily beauty and death preparation. The water came from sacred temple wells and was often infused with lotus petals, which Egyptians believed carried the essence of rebirth. Now here is something that'll blow your mind. Egyptians didn't put on makeup just to look attractive. They believed that certain cosmetic applications could literally ward off evil spirits. That famous black kohl around their eyes? That wasn't just dramatic flair, it was spiritual armor. The shape mimicked the protective eye of Horus, and parents would paint it on children as young as 3 years old. But let's talk about the economic side of this beauty obsession, because the numbers are absolutely staggering. The ancient Egyptian beauty industry was worth what would be equivalent to about $2.3 billion in today's money. Cleopatra alone reportedly spent the equivalent of $12 million annually just on her personal cosmetics. To put that in perspective, she spent more on makeup than some small countries spend on their entire military budgets today. The most coveted ingredient was something called Odu green malachite powder that came exclusively from mines in the Sinai Peninsula. This wasn't just expensive, it was literally worth more than gold by weight. Caravans would risk their lives crossing dangerous desert routes to bring this green powder to the wealthy elite, because having the perfect green eyeshadow could mean the difference between being accepted by the gods or condemned to spiritual darkness. And here is something that would probably surprise modern beauty influencers. Men wore just as much makeup as women, sometimes even more. King Tutankhamun's tomb contained over 100 pots of cosmetics, creams, and perfumed oils. When Howard Carter first opened that tomb in 1922, he found that some of these cosmetics were still perfectly preserved, and get this, still fragrant after 3,000 years. But perhaps the most haunting aspect of Egyptian beauty standards was their obsession with eternal perfection. They weren't just getting ready for today, this week, or even this lifetime. Every single day, they were preparing for eternity. Museums around the world house collections of mirrors from ancient Egypt, and many of them are inscribed with prayers asking the gods to maintain the owner's beauty not just in life, but forever in the afterlife. You see, the Egyptians believed that your soul had to recognize your body in order to reunite with it in the afterlife. So if you didn't maintain your physical appearance perfectly, your soul might get lost for eternity. Talk about pressure, right? Imagine if every time you skipped your skincare routine, you were literally risking your immortal soul. Recent discoveries have revealed that wealthy Egyptians were actually tattooing themselves with semi-permanent cosmetic designs, essentially ancient permanent makeup, so they'd never have a bad eternity day. The dedication is honestly both admirable and terrifying. As we wrap up this first section, I want you to think about this. Every morning when you look in the mirror, you're participating in a ritual that's thousands of years old. That moment of checking your reflection, adjusting your appearance, maybe putting on a little makeup, you are connecting with ancient souls who stood before polished copper mirrors along the Nile, preparing not just for their day, but for eternity itself. The ancient Egyptians understood something profound about beauty that we are only beginning to rediscover. It is not really about vanity at all. It's about transformation, about becoming the best version of yourself, about respecting the divine spark within you. They just took it to levels that would make modern beauty gurus weep with envy or terror. Now, let me ask you something that might keep you up tonight. What if everything Hollywood ever told you about the most famous beautiful woman in history was completely wrong? What if Cleopatra VII, the woman who supposedly launched 1,000 ships with her beauty, actually looked nothing like Elizabeth Taylor or Gal Gadot? And what if her real secret to captivating the most powerful men in the world had absolutely nothing to do with her physical appearance? Get comfortable, because we're about to shatter some illusions. Here's the thing that will blow your mind. We actually have coins from Cleopatra's reign, real, authentic coins minted during her lifetime. Museums house several of these, and when researchers first studied them under high-resolution microscopy, their findings were, well, let's just say they weren't what you'd expect from the most beautiful woman who ever lived. The coins show a woman with a prominent hooked nose, a protruding chin, and what historians delicately call masculine features. One researcher put it more bluntly: if Cleopatra walked into a modern casting call for her own biopic, she'd probably be sent home. The formulations were so advanced that modern cosmetic companies are still trying to reverse engineer some of these ancient recipes. But here's where the story gets absolutely fascinating. Because, you see, Cleopatra understood something that modern influencers are just beginning to figure out. True magnetism isn't about perfect features. It's about perfect strategy. And oh, goodness, did this woman have strategy? Let me paint you the real picture of who Cleopatra was. First off, she wasn't even Egyptian. She was Macedonian Greek, descended from Alexander the Great's general Ptolemy. The Ptolemaic dynasty had ruled Egypt for 300 years by the time she was born. And here's a fact that'll make you uncomfortable. They kept their bloodline pure through sibling marriage. Cleopatra was actually married to two of her younger brothers. Different times, different customs, but still, yikes. But here's what made her extraordinary. She was the first Ptolemaic ruler in 300 years to actually learn Egyptian. According to ancient historian Plutarch, she spoke 9 languages fluently. 9. While her predecessors sat in their Greek palaces completely disconnected from their subjects, Cleopatra walked among the people, speaking their language literally and figuratively. Research has shown that Cleopatra's real beauty secret wasn't makeup or fashion. It was intelligence weaponized through theater. Every single public appearance was a carefully orchestrated performance designed to demonstrate her divine connection to the gods. Let me tell you about her most legendary entrance, the one that supposedly seduced Julius Caesar. You've probably heard the story about her being smuggled to Caesar wrapped in a carpet, right? Well, according to historical sources, it wasn't a carpet, it was a linen sack. And she wasn't trying to seduce him with physical beauty. She was demonstrating her resourcefulness, courage, and absolute fearlessness. Imagine, here's a 21-year-old woman who just had herself smuggled past enemy guards in a laundry bag to face the most powerful man in the world. That takes guts most of us can't even imagine. But the real genius move? The moment Caesar unrolled that sack and Cleopatra stepped out, she immediately began speaking to him in perfect Latin. Not Egyptian, not Greek, but his own language. One biographer describes this moment as the ancient world's most brilliant job interview. She got the position, by the way. Now about her famous beauty routine, because she absolutely had one. Just not for the reasons you think. Roman historians wrote that Cleopatra bathed in donkey milk infused with honey and almond oil. Sounds luxurious, right? But recent chemical analysis revealed something incredible. This combination creates lactic acid and alpha hydroxy acids, essentially ancient chemical peels. She wasn't just pampering herself. She was using advanced skincare science that wouldn't be rediscovered until the 20th century. And that famous pearl dissolved in vinegar that she supposedly drank? Research suggests this wasn't just a flex of wealth. It was a demonstration of chemical knowledge. Cleopatra knew that calcium carbonate pearl plus acetic acid vinegar would create a drinkable calcium supplement. She was literally showing off her understanding of chemistry while simultaneously proving she had unlimited resources. Talk about a power move. Here's something Hollywood completely missed. Cleopatra's most seductive feature wasn't her face or her body, it was her voice. Ancient sources are unanimous about this. Plutarch wrote that her voice was like a many-stringed instrument. She had trained with the best rhetoric teachers in Alexandria, and she used her voice like a master musician uses a violin. Modern linguistic studies of ancient descriptions suggest she had mastered what we now call vocal seduction, using tone, rhythm, and pacing to create an almost hypnotic effect on listeners. But let's talk about her relationship with Mark Antony, because this is where things get really interesting. You know that famous scene where she arrives dressed as Venus on a golden barge? That actually happened. But here's what the movies don't tell you. It was psychological warfare disguised as romance. That golden barge entrance was specifically designed to remind Antony and everyone watching that Egypt was fabulously wealthy while Rome was financially struggling from decades of civil war. The purple sails, the silver oars, the perfumed wind that could be smelled from shore, it was all calculated to demonstrate that Egypt had resources Rome desperately needed. And it worked. Within hours of that entrance, Antony had essentially pledged Rome's military support to Egypt. The FDA researcher points out that this was perhaps the most expensive seduction in ancient Egyptian and the most strategically brilliant. 200,000 parts the heartbreaking part of Cleopatra's story that applied directly to one of the most sensitive areas of your body. And Antony, twice daily, letters discovered in ancient collections reveal a woman who was desperately trying to balance her heart with her duty to Egypt. In one fragment, she writes something like, "I dream of a world where love doesn't require armies to defend it. You have to understand this woman was carrying the weight of a 3,000-year-old civilization on her shoulders. She knew she was the last pharaoh, the final link in a chain stretching back to the pyramid builders. The pressure must have been unimaginable. One calculation shows that Cleopatra successfully maintained Egyptian independence for 22 years against Roman expansion, longer than any other Mediterranean power. That's not beauty. That's political genius of the highest order. And when the end came, even her suicide was strategic. She chose the asp, the sacred cobra, because it was the symbol of pharaonic power. Even in death, she was making a statement, I am still the pharaoh of Egypt. According to ancient historians, her final words were in Egyptian, not Greek or Latin. I will not be paraded through Rome as a trophy. The real tragedy is that for 2,000 years, we've reduced this brilliant, multilingual, strategically gifted leader to nothing more than a pretty face who seduced men with her looks. It's like calling Einstein that guy who had weird hair. Maybe that's fitting in a way, because Cleopatra's greatest beauty secret, the one that made her more magnetic than any supermodel, was that she refused to be just beautiful. She insisted on being brilliant, fearless, and unforgettable. Imagine putting on your eyeliner this morning and literally signing your own death warrant. Sounds dramatic, right? Well, buckle up, because we're about to dive into one of the most chilling beauty stories in human history, where the pursuit of perfect eyes came with a price that would make modern makeup artists quit their jobs immediately. Let's step into the sandals of an ancient Egyptian woman. We'll call her Ankhesenemen. Like every Egyptian woman of her time, she began her day by carefully applying kohl around her eyes. This wasn't just makeup, it was spiritual armor, social status, and fashion statement all rolled into one dramatic black line. But here's where our story takes a dark turn. In 2010, researchers made a discovery that sent shockwaves through the archaeological community. When they analyzed residue from over 400 ancient Egyptian kohl containers, they found something terrifying. 85% contain lead sulfide concentrations that were literally off the charts. We're talking about lead levels that were 10,000 times higher than what's considered safe today. Research revealed the horrifying truth. A typical Egyptian woman absorbed enough lead through her daily kohl application to cause what we now recognize as chronic lead poisoning. The symptoms: hair loss, tooth decay, kidney failure, neurological damage, and eventually death. But here's the truly heartbreaking part. They knew something was wrong. Ancient medical texts describe a mysterious eye sickness that primarily affected wealthy women who could afford the finest kohl. The symptoms described trembling hands, weakness of limbs, darkness of thought, are textbook signs of lead poisoning. Yet they continued using it because the social pressure was too intense to resist. Let me tell you about a woman whose mummy was discovered in the Valley of the Queens. When researchers analyzed her remains, they found lead concentrations in her bones that were 200 times higher than normal. But here's the kicker. Her burial mask shows perfectly applied kohl lines, even in death. She literally died for beauty and was buried with the very poison that killed her. Now, you might be thinking, surely they had some alternatives, right? Well, researchers discovered something fascinating and tragic. The Egyptians did have safer alternatives. Charcoal mixed with animal fat created a similar dark effect with zero toxicity. But there was a problem. It was considered peasant makeup. The lead-based kohl had this incredible metallic shimmer that caught the light beautifully, making eyes appear almost supernatural. The safe stuff just looked ordinary. So essentially, ancient Egyptian women faced the same choice modern women face with cosmetic procedures. Play it safe and look basic, or risk everything for that extra bit of glamour. The difference was that their everything was literally everything. But the psychological aspect of this story is what really gets me. Research has shown that Egyptian women who stopped using kohl faced social ostracism so severe that many preferred death to public shame. There are documented cases of women being divorced, losing their children, and even being accused of witchcraft simply for appearing in public without properly lined eyes. The pressure was so intense that mothers would start applying kohl to their daughters as young as 3 years old. Can you imagine? Toddlers barely old enough to walk were already being slowly poisoned in the name of beauty. Museums house tiny kohl applicators clearly designed for children's eyes. It's one of the most disturbing exhibits researchers have encountered. And here's something that'll give you chills. Wealthy families would hire kohl tasters, usually slaves whose job was to test new batches of kohl by applying it first and waiting to see if they developed symptoms. If they lived through the testing period, usually about a month, the kohl was declared safe for the family to use. Estimates suggest that over 10,000 people died serving as human kohl testers during the New Kingdom period alone. But the story gets even more sinister. The most expensive kohl, the kind that royalty used, contained not just lead, but also mercury and antimony. This triple poison cocktail created the most stunning, longest lasting, most dramatically beautiful eye makeup ever created. It also created madness, blindness, and death with terrifying efficiency. Chemical analysis of cosmetic residue found in Queen Nefertiti's tomb suggests she was using kohl that was nearly 60% pure lead. When you look at those famous busts of Nefertiti with those incredibly dramatic eyes, you're not just seeing ancient beauty standards, you're seeing the visual evidence of slow-motion suicide. And here's where it gets personal. Have you ever heard the phrase, "beauty is pain"? That comes directly from ancient Egypt. Ancient texts include this haunting line, "She who would be beautiful must accept the gift of suffering. They literally codified the idea that beauty requires sacrifice, and that philosophy has echoed through every generation since. From radium-laced face creams in the 1920s to formaldehyde-based hair straighteners today, the beauty industry's willingness to prioritize profit over safety has remained remarkably consistent across millennia. Research calculated that during the height of Egyptian civilization, kohl-related deaths accounted for approximately 15% of female mortality among the upper classes. 15%. That means if you were a wealthy Egyptian woman, you had roughly a 1 in 7 chance of being literally killed by your makeup routine. But here's the twist that makes this story even more complex. Some of the lead-based kohl actually did have protective properties. Research showed that certain formulations could prevent eye infections and repel insects. So these women weren't completely wrong. Their makeup was providing some legitimate benefits. They just didn't realize they were trading short-term protection for long-term death. The irony is almost too much to bear. They called kohl mestemet, which means that which protects. They believed it was literally saving their lives when, in reality, it was ending them. The ancient Egyptians created the world's first beauty myth, that suffering for aesthetics was not only acceptable, but noble. And you know what the most heartbreaking part is? When archaeologists analyze Egyptian mummies from this period, the women who died from kohl poisoning still have traces of it perfectly applied around their eye sockets. Even in their final moments, even as their bodies were shutting down from toxicity, they made sure their eye makeup was flawless. That level of dedication to beauty standards, that willingness to die rather than appear imperfect, it's simultaneously admirable and absolutely terrifying. Think you know everything about tanning? Think again. What if I told you that 4,000 years before Instagram filters and spray tans, ancient Egyptians had perfected a beauty technique so dangerous that it literally turned people into gold and then killed them? Close your eyes for a moment and imagine this. You're standing on the banks of the Nile at dawn, watching as dozens of wealthy Egyptian women deliberately expose themselves to the desert sun for hours, covered head to toe in what can only be described as liquid gold. They're not just tanning, they're transforming themselves into living goddesses, one deadly ray at a time. Here's something that'll completely blow your mind. The ancient Egyptians didn't want to tan. They wanted to literally become gold. Research from 2018 analyzed pigment samples from tomb paintings and made a stunning discovery. What they found wasn't just artistic license, it was documentary evidence of a beauty practice so extreme it sounds like science fiction. The Egyptians believed that the gods had golden skin because they were made of the same divine substance as the sun. So naturally, if you wanted to be closer to the gods, you needed golden skin too. Simple logic, right? Except their method of achieving this divine glow involved a combination of actual gold dust, crocodile fat, and something called desert glass, which modern analysis has revealed to be naturally occurring radioactive silica. Yes, you heard that right. They were literally applying radioactive materials to their skin in pursuit of the perfect golden glow. Analysis of mummy remains from the Valley of the Kings found something that still gives researchers chills. Wealthy women from the New Kingdom period had gold particles embedded so deeply in their skin tissue that they were still visible 3,000 years later. But more disturbing, many of these same mummies showed clear signs of radiation poisoning brittle bones, organ damage, and cellular mutations that could only come from prolonged exposure to radioactive materials. Let me tell you about one of King Akhenaten's wives. When researchers examined her remains, they found her skin still had a faint golden shimmer. Beautiful, right? Not so much when you learn that her bones were so brittle from radiation damage that they crumbled when exposed to air. She had literally sacrificed her skeletal system for eternal golden skin. But the most shocking part, they had a whole industry built around this obsession. According to ancient business records, there were entire guilds of golden skin preparers who charged what would be equivalent to $15,000 in today's money for a single full-body treatment. The process was absolutely insane. First, clients would fast for 3 days to purify their essence, which we now know was actually just dehydrating them to make their skin more absorbent. Then they'd be covered in a mixture that included real gold leaf, powdered malachite, crushed pearls, crocodile fat, and here's the kicker, ground up meteorite fragments. Researchers analyzed residue from golden skin preparation tools and confirmed that meteorites were indeed a key ingredient. Why meteorites? Because the Egyptians believed they were gifts from the sun god Ra, making them the perfect conduit for divine golden energy. In reality, most meteorites contain trace amounts of uranium and other radioactive elements, so these women were literally paying to be painted with space radiation. Museums house collections of golden skin mirrors, polished metal surfaces that were used to check the evenness of golden skin application. Analysis revealed that these mirrors have measurable radiation signatures even today. 3,000 years later, think about that for a moment. The tools they used to apply this treatment are still radioactive after 3 millennia. But here's where the story gets really heartbreaking. Ancient texts contain what appears to be the world's first documented case of radiation sickness. It describes a wealthy woman who underwent golden skin treatments and then suffered from the wasting disease, hair loss, nausea, weakness, and eventually death. The text specifically mentions that her skin maintained its divine glow even as she was dying. And you know what's really tragic? The Egyptians actually documented the connection between golden skin treatments and illness, but they interpreted it completely wrong. They thought the sickness was a sign that the gods were calling these women home because they had become too divine for earthly existence. So instead of stopping the treatments, they saw illness as proof that the process was working. Excavations discovered what appears to be a golden skin factory facility where dozens of women lived permanently while undergoing continuous golden skin treatments. The building's walls still register radiation levels that would require hazmat suits to explore safely today. But perhaps the most chilling discovery came from work on Nefertiti's possible mummy. While the identification remains disputed, the mummy shows clear evidence of golden skin treatment so intensive that her entire skeletal system was compromised. CT scans reveal bone density so low that she likely couldn't walk without assistance in her final years. Yet her skin tissue still contains enough gold particles to catch light under laboratory conditions. The economic impact of this obsession was staggering. Calculations show that the golden skin industry consumed approximately 40% of Egypt's gold production during the New Kingdom period. That's gold that could have been used for trade, military equipment, or infrastructure instead. Wealthy women were literally wearing it on their skin till it killed them. And here's something that will make you rethink modern beauty standards. The Egyptians had different shades of golden skin. Just like we have different foundation colors today. Ancient texts list over 30 different divine golden formulations, ranging from morning sun gold to desert storm gold. Each required different combinations of radioactive materials, meaning some were more lethal than others. The application process took an entire day and required a team of specialists. Tomb paintings show that a full golden skin treatment involved 7 different people: the mixer, the applicator, the buffer, the detail artist, the inspector, the prayer reciter, and I kid you not, the death watcher, whose job was to monitor the client for signs of immediate poisoning. Calculations show that a single full-body golden skin treatment exposed recipients to roughly 500 times the radiation dose considered safe by modern standards. To put that in perspective, it was equivalent to getting 100 chest X-rays while standing next to a nuclear reactor, and wealthy Egyptian women did this monthly. But here's the most mind-bending part. It actually worked. Visually speaking, tomb paintings show women with skin that appears to literally glow from within. Archaeological evidence suggests that the combination of gold particles and radioactive materials created a bioluminescent effect. Their skin actually emitted light. They had turned themselves into human fireflies, and it was absolutely stunning to behold. The tragic irony is that they achieved exactly what they wanted. They became golden goddesses who literally glowed with divine light. The only problem was that this transformation came with a 100% mortality rate. Analysis shows that every single woman who underwent intensive golden skin treatments died within 5 years. Yet they kept doing it. Why? Because the alternative, looking ordinary, aging naturally, appearing merely human, was considered a fate worse than death. Research found evidence that women who refused golden skin treatments were often divorced by their husbands and ostracized by society. In ancient Egypt, it was better to be a beautiful corpse than a living commoner. The practice finally began to decline during the late period, not because people realized it was dangerous, but because Egypt's gold mines started running dry. The Persian conquest in 525 BCE essentially ended the golden skin industry by cutting off access to both gold and radioactive desert glass. In a twisted way, foreign invasion probably saved hundreds of Egyptian women's lives by making their deadly beauty treatment economically impossible. Here's a question that might keep you up tonight. What if your hairstyle could literally determine whether you lived or died? What if a bad hair day wasn't just embarrassing, but could actually get you exiled, divorced, or even executed? Welcome to ancient Egypt, where hair wasn't just about fashion, it was about survival, divinity, and social warfare at the highest levels. And trust me, by the end of this story, you'll never complain about a $200 salon visit again. Picture this. It's dawn in ancient Thebes, and a wealthy Egyptian woman is preparing for the most important day of her life, her daughter's wedding. But she's not worried about flowers or food. She's terrified because her most expensive wig, the one that cost her family the equivalent of a modern Lamborghini, has just been stolen. Without it, she can't appear in public. Without it, the wedding will be called off. Without it, her family's social standing will be destroyed forever. This isn't fiction. It's based on actual court records. Hair theft was such a serious crime in ancient Egypt that it carried the same penalty as stealing cattle or grain. We're talking about people's wigs being worth more than their homes. research made a discovery that revolutionized our understanding of Egyptian hair culture. When over 2,000 mummies from various periods were analyzed, something shocking was found. Nearly 90% of wealthy Egyptians were completely bald under their elaborate wigs. Not naturally bald, deliberately bald. They were shaving off perfectly healthy hair to make room for increasingly elaborate artificial creations. Why would someone shave off beautiful natural hair? Well, according to ancient texts, natural hair was considered spiritually impure because it grew from the body, which was associated with decay and death. Wigs, on the other hand, were made from carefully selected hair that had been blessed, purified, and infused with divine essences. Wearing a wig wasn't just fashion, it was literally wearing the God's approval on your head. But here's where things get absolutely wild. The most expensive wigs weren't made from human hair at all. Museums house several examples of what researchers call divine hair wigs made from the manes of sacred lions. Yes, lions. Wealthy Egyptians were paying fortunes to wear predator hair because they believed it would give them the strength and majesty of the king of beasts. The process of creating these lion mane wigs was absolutely insane. According to tomb paintings, it required a specialized team that included a lion hunter, a hair preparer, a colorist, a stylist, and I'm not kidding, a mane blessing priest, whose only job was to pray over each individual strand to ensure divine approval. Chemical analysis of these ancient wigs discovered something that would make modern hairstylists weep with envy. They were using techniques we've only recently rediscovered. The hair was treated with a combination of beeswax, tree resins, and something called divine oil, which turns out to be a sophisticated polymer that kept elaborate styles intact for months without washing. And speaking of elaborate styles, let me paint you a picture of what wealthy Egyptian women were walking around with on their heads. We're talking about hair sculptures that stood up to 3 feet tall, incorporated real gold threads, featured moving parts powered by hidden counterweights, and in some cases contained actual live birds in tiny cages woven into the structure. Yes, you read that correctly. Live birds. Tomb paintings have been discovered showing women with wigs that included divine messengers, small colorful birds that would chirp and move around within the hair structure. The idea was that these birds could carry prayers directly to the gods. The practical reality was that wealthy women were walking around with basically small zoos on their heads. Museums house what might be the most expensive hairstyle in human history, a wig belonging to a queen that contained over 200 individual elements, including gold threads, precious stones, carved ivory ornaments, and what appears to be genuine phoenix feathers. When its modern value was calculated, researchers estimated it would cost approximately $2.8 million to recreate today. But the social pressure around these elaborate wigs was absolutely crushing. Translated letters between Egyptian women reveal a level of hair anxiety that makes modern social media seem tame. One letter dating to around 1400 BCE reads, "My sister, I have not left my home in 6 days, for my hairmaker has fallen ill, and I dare not be seen with yesterday's arrangement. Please send word of any new styles you have witnessed, so that I might not appear provincial when I next venture forth." And the maintenance costs were absolutely staggering. A single elaborate wig required a team of 3 full-time specialists, a cleaner who would disassemble and reassemble the entire structure weekly, a stylist who would adjust the arrangement daily, and a guard who would literally sleep next to the wig storage room to prevent theft. Calculations show that maintaining a high-status wig collection consumed about 30% of a wealthy family's annual income. But here's where the story takes a dark turn. Wig addiction was a real thing. Ancient medical texts describe a condition called crown madness, women who became so obsessed with elaborate hairstyles that they would spend entire days arranging and rearranging their wigs, refusing to eat, sleep, or interact with family members. Some women reportedly died from dehydration because they wouldn't interrupt their styling sessions to drink water. In a tomb, researchers found the remains of a woman buried with 17 different wigs arranged around her sarcophagus. Chemical analysis revealed that she had died from lead poisoning, not from cosmetics, but from the lead-based dyes used to color her wig collection. She had literally been killed by her hair accessories. The most tragic case involves a woman whose mummy is displayed at a museum. Analysis revealed that this woman had undergone experimental scalp surgery to create permanent anchor points for increasingly heavy wigs. The procedure went wrong, causing a massive infection that led to her death. She died trying to surgically modify her skull to better support her hairstyles. The threads connecting ancient Egyptian cosmetics to your morning skincare routine are more direct than you might imagine. Every time you apply eyeliner, use anti-aging cream, or even take a selfie, you're participating in beauty rituals that trace their origins back to the banks of the Nile. A leading perfumer and fragrance historian spent over 2 decades reverse engineering ancient Egyptian cosmetic formulations, and what she discovered revolutionized the modern beauty industry. Working with chemical analysis from museum collections, she found that Egyptian cosmetic chemists had developed techniques that modern companies are still trying to perfect. Take waterproof mascara, for example. We think it was invented in 1938, right? Wrong. Analysis of kohl residue from Egyptian mummies found sophisticated polymer compounds that created the exact same waterproof effect we achieve today. The ancient Egyptians had perfected waterproof eye makeup for 1,000 years before modern cosmetic companies figured it out. But here's where it gets really wild. Major cosmetic corporations are actively studying these ancient formulations. Research has revealed that companies like L'Oréal, Estée Lauder, and Procter & Gamble have teams of archaeochemists whose job is to analyze ancient cosmetic residues and adapt the findings for modern products. The results are everywhere, hiding in plain sight. That expensive anti-aging serum you might use? There's a good chance it contains compounds that were first identified in Egyptian beauty preparations. Research found that wealthy Egyptian women were using alpha-hydroxy acids, retinol precursors, and even peptide complexes that form the backbone of modern skincare science. But the influence goes far beyond just ingredients. Analysis of ancient Egyptian beauty texts compared to modern advertising psychology found that we're using virtually identical persuasion techniques. The ancient Egyptians were the first civilization to market beauty products using fear of aging, social rejection, and spiritual inadequacy. Sound familiar? Modern beauty advertising still uses these exact same psychological pressure points that Egyptian cosmetic sellers mastered thousands of years ago. Ancient advertisements have been found that could have been written by modern marketing executives. Do not let the years steal your divine radiance. Restore your youthful glow with the sacred oils of eternal beauty. Replace sacred oils with miracle serum, and you've got a contemporary beauty ad. But perhaps the most shocking connection involves our modern obsession with influencer culture. Evidence has been discovered that ancient Egypt had its own version of beauty influencers, wealthy women whose makeup and styling choices were copied throughout society. These divine beauties would appear at public events showcasing new cosmetic techniques, and within days, everyone would be trying to recreate their looks. Museums house limestone fragments covered with what researchers call ancient beauty tutorials, detailed instructions for recreating the makeup looks of famous Egyptian women, complete with step-by-step diagrams and ingredient lists. They're basically 4-year-old YouTube tutorials written on rocks. The parallels to modern social media are uncanny. Evidence has been found that these beauty influencers would deliberately create dramatic new looks to maintain public attention, often pushing increasingly extreme styles to stay relevant. Some would even stage public beauty failures to generate sympathy and discussion. They had essentially invented viral marketing through cosmetic controversy. But the most direct connection between ancient Egypt and modern beauty culture involves our relationship with mirrors. Discovery shows that ancient Egyptians were the first culture to make daily mirror gazing a mandatory social ritual. Wealthy Egyptians were required to check their appearance in mirrors at least 6 times daily, documenting any changes or imperfections in detailed personal logs. They had created a system of obsessive self-monitoring that's remarkably similar to modern social media behavior, except instead of posting photos, they were writing detailed reports about their appearance. Research found that these appearance logs often contain the same psychological patterns we see in modern body dysmorphia: obsessive focus on minor imperfections, constant comparison to idealized standards, and devastating emotional responses to perceived flaws. The ancient Egyptians had essentially invented the psychological framework for modern beauty anxiety, complete with daily rituals of self-examination and social comparison that would be instantly recognizable to any modern therapist treating body image issues. Even our modern spa culture traces directly back to ancient Egypt. Evidence has been found of elaborate beauty treatment facilities that offered services remarkably similar to modern luxury spas: mud baths, aromatherapy, massage therapy, and even early forms of hydrotherapy. But here's what's really fascinating. These ancient spas served the same psychological function as modern ones. They weren't just about beauty treatments, they were about temporary escape from social pressure, community bonding among women, and the illusion of controlling aging and mortality through beauty rituals. Research found that wealthy Egyptian women would spend days at these facilities, not because they needed extensive beauty treatments, but because the spa environment provided relief from the crushing social pressure to maintain perfect appearance at all times. The business models were surprisingly similar too. Evidence has been found of ancient spa membership systems, loyalty programs, and even early forms of beauty product sales that operated almost exactly like modern wellness industry practices. But perhaps the most important connection involves our modern understanding of beauty's relationship to mental health. Ancient Egyptian medical texts contain detailed descriptions of what we would now recognize as body dysmorphia, eating disorders, and beauty-related anxiety disorders. Evidence shows that Egyptian physicians had developed treatment protocols for beauty-related mental health issues that include techniques still used in modern therapy: cognitive restructuring, exposure therapy, and social support systems. The ancient Egyptians understood something that modern psychology is still catching up to. Beauty culture can be psychologically destructive if taken to extremes, and societies need systematic approaches to help people maintain healthy relationships with their appearance. But they also understood beauty's positive potential. Evidence has been found that moderate beauty enhancement was associated with improved self-esteem, social confidence, and overall life satisfaction. The key was balance, something Egyptian society eventually lost, but modern wellness culture is trying to rediscover. The most hopeful discovery comes from research on late-period Egyptian beauty culture. As the civilization matured, beauty standards became more inclusive, diverse, and psychologically healthy. They had learned from their own extremes and developed more sustainable approaches to aesthetic enhancement. This gives us a roadmap for modern beauty culture. We can appreciate the artistry, science, and psychological benefits of beauty enhancement while avoiding the destructive extremes that characterize peak Egyptian beauty obsession. After traveling through 5,000 years of beauty culture together, we've arrived at the most important question of all: what does this incredible, shocking, and sometimes heartbreaking journey through ancient Egyptian aesthetics actually mean for us today? As I look back on everything we've discovered, from radioactive golden skin treatments to deadly kohl applications, from million-dollar wigs to class warfare fought with cosmetics, I see patterns that are both timeless and urgently relevant to our modern world. The truth is, we never really left ancient Egypt. We just moved the temples online and replaced the pharaohs with influencers. Recent studies comparing ancient Egyptian beauty texts with modern social media behavior found something stunning. The psychological patterns, social pressures, and individual responses to beauty standards are virtually identical across 4,000 years of human experience. The ancient Egyptians who spent 3 hours daily applying makeup, meet the modern teenagers who spend 3 hours daily perfecting their social media presence. The wealthy Egyptian women who bankrupted their families for cosmetic treatments. Meet the millions of people going into debt for cosmetic procedures today. The Egyptian beauty influencers who stage dramatic looks for public attention. Well, that one doesn't need much explanation, does it? But here's what gives me hope. Understanding this history means we can make different choices. The ancient Egyptians didn't have the benefit of psychological research, social science, or historical perspective. They were pioneering beauty culture without a roadmap, making it up as they went along and inevitably making mistakes that cost lives, destroyed families, and sometimes toppled civilizations. We have the luxury of their experience to learn from. We can see where beauty culture leads when it becomes disconnected from health, happiness, and human dignity. We can recognize the warning signs of a society that values appearance over well-being. And most importantly, we can choose a different path. When beauty enhancement increases your confidence, helps you express your creativity, or simply brings you joy, it's serving a positive function. When it becomes a source of anxiety, financial stress, or self-hatred, it's time to step back and reassess. The ancient Egyptians learned this lesson the hard way. Late period texts show a civilization that had evolved beyond the destructive extremes of earlier eras. They had developed what we might call sustainable beauty culture approaches to aesthetic enhancement that emphasize balance, individual expression, and psychological health. Their final beauty wisdom, carved into temple walls, reads something like, "True beauty flows from a spirit at peace with itself." The gods prefer a genuine smile to perfect features, a kind heart to flawless skin, and a confident soul to the most elaborate adornment. That's a lesson worth remembering as we navigate our own beauty landscape, whether we're scrolling through social media, standing in front of mirrors, or making decisions about how to present ourselves to the world. So what can we take from this extraordinary journey? First, that your worth as a human being has absolutely nothing to do with your appearance. The ancient Egyptians got caught in the trap of believing that physical beauty determined spiritual worth, social value, and even chances of eternal salvation. We know better. Second, that sustainable beauty culture is possible. We can appreciate artistry, joy enhancement, and take pleasure in aesthetic expression without sacrificing our health, finances, or psychological well-being. Third, that the pressure you might feel to look perfect isn't personal, it's historical. You're not weak or vain for caring about your appearance. You're human, participating in impulses and anxieties that have existed as long as people have lived in societies. And finally, that you have more power than you realize. Every time you choose self-acceptance over self-criticism, every time you prioritize health over appearance, every time you resist the pressure to pursue impossible standards, you're helping to create a more humane beauty culture for everyone. The ancient Egyptians gave us incredible gifts: the foundations of cosmetic science, the artistry of aesthetic enhancement, and the understanding that beauty can be a form of self-expression and spiritual practice. But they also gave us a cautionary tale about what happens when beauty culture becomes detached from wisdom, compassion, and human values. As you go forward from here, I hope you'll remember the lessons hidden in ancient Egyptian beauty culture. Take care of yourself. Enhance your appearance in ways that bring you joy and express your unique vision. But do it from a place of self-love, not self-rejection. And remember that the most beautiful thing about you isn't anything you can apply, inject, or surgically enhance. It's the spark of consciousness behind your eyes, the unique way you experience the world, and the love and kindness you bring to the people around you. Thank you for taking this incredible journey with me through the sands of time and the depths of human nature. Tonight, as you drift off to sleep, remember that you are part of an unbroken chain of people who have looked in mirrors, experimented with enhancement, and sought to present their best selves to the world. You're connected to queens and pharaohs, to artists and innovators, to dreamers and creators who understood that caring for your appearance is one of the many ways humans express love for themselves and respect for others. Sweet dreams. And may you wake up feeling radiant, not because of perfect features, but because of the perfect spirit that makes you uniquely, beautifully you.